When photographing wildlife, sometimes you need extra reach on your lenses. This is where teleconverters can come in really useful. We have on the Z series a 1.4 teleconverter and a 2x teleconverter. Some other lenses also have them built in. The teleconverters extend the reach, so 2x will double the reach of your lens, so your focal length is doubled, but it will also double your minimum aperture of your lens. The 1.4x will times the reach by 1.4, and again the aperture by 1.4. So on this 100 to 400 I have here, with the 1.4 teleconverter, becomes a 560mm at f8. Now that is still really good for wildlife, because at 560mm, your depth of field is very much reduced. So even though you're shooting at f8, you still get really good separation between your subject and the background, especially if we're photographing, for example, birds or something like that, which are far off from the background.
It's also worth pointing out that not every lens can take a teleconverter, right? So one of the things that we always get questions about is what lenses can we use with teleconverters? And it's always just double checking if the lens that you have is compatible with a Nikon teleconverter. Generally, it tends to be the longer focal length. So if you've got something like a 24 to 200 or a 24 to 70, you're not going to be able to use that with a teleconverter, sadly. They are designed to work with things like this 100 to 400, 70 to 200, and then some of the other longer lenses like this one here, which is a 400 2.8, and the new 800mm lens as well. Now, if a lens does have an inbuilt teleconverter, like you mentioned, some lenses have an inbuilt teleconverter like this, you can still use them with external teleconverters. So I could take that one off the back of that lens, I could still put it on the back of here. That gives us an incredible reach and the real ability to customize what focal length you want for what you're trying to shoot, really. So flexibility is key, I suppose, when it comes to wildlife, right?
Yeah, I find having the teleconverter in my bag, it gives me that extra reach for those few times I perhaps need it, when this 100 to 400 isn't long enough, or I don't have, say for example, the 800mm out with me as well.
I think it's always worth thinking about if you are torn between two lenses and you're thinking, oh, should I go to either a longer focal length lens? Should I include a teleconverter? Because, you know, one of the things that you used to do was you use a 70 to 200 with a teleconverter, right? And that allowed you to get to a focal length that you wouldn't be able to have without a teleconverter. And then some people would still prefer to just use like a 100 to 400, for example. So it's always thinking about what the options are, because a teleconverter might give you extra flexibility that you didn't think you could use in the first place.
So yeah, the 70 to 200 I used to use goes to 140 to 400 at 5.6 with a 2x teleconverter on it, which again, very versatile for bird photography like we've been doing today. So that would have been an option to bring along as well, especially if wanted to travel light.
Yeah, and one of the other questions we always get a lot is, should I use a teleconverter, or especially if I've got a camera with a lot of megapixels, should I just crop in or should I use a DX crop instead? And it does depend on what you want your final outcome to be. So the key thing to keep in mind is that yes, on a lot of high resolution cameras you can still crop in and still get quite a chunk of megapixels left over. And if you're not necessarily needing to print to quite a large print, or if you're not needing those extra megapixels to crop in even further again, then that's generally the right way to go in a lot of cases. However, if you do need all of those megapixels, that's where a teleconverter will still come in, because it allows you to shoot full resolution and you're increasing the focal length. Especially with some of these teleconverters now, you're not really changing the quality too much. You're obviously changing the aperture slightly, but the actual level of sharpness is still pretty impressive. So you get full resolution, still overall good quality, and then you could still crop in afterwards, after the fact, if you needed even more reach. So
yeah, they are really versatile. I wouldn't be without this one in my bag.
No. And like you say, especially if you just wanted a smaller kit, there are times where we go and shoot landscapes and you don't really want to take a big chunky lens. So that's really where a teleconverter can turn a 70 to 200 into actually a usable wildlife lens in some situations as well, which I think is always useful.